So all I'm saying, Dane, is that if Jeffrey Dahmer would have just sexually identified as a murderer, not only would we have missed this conflagration, he wouldn't have been held accountable for any of his, we would have been persecuting him for holding him accountable for, taking other people's lives. It's not his fault. He's sexually identified as that. We need to let him do that. That's all I'm saying.
I thought we were talking about the orange and purple lights for Halloween behind us.
Well, we took a dark turn.
Jeez, that escalated quickly.
But yeah, we're welcome to Spooktober here at the podcast. We
hope you enjoy.
We decorated a little bit.
Yeah, we changed two things, but welcome.
We won't add spider webs next week. We're phasing it in. Okay.
Yeah,
we're easing into Spooktober.
Can't startle the crowd with too much background material.
I can't come out dressed as Lady Gaga the first week. All right.
Fair.
Got it.
People will have questions.
So anyway, to the brass tacks. All right, culture corner. Let's go over the election of Giorgia Meloni. If you're reading it like a Southerner, it's Giorgia Meloni.
But where are you from? Giorgia Meloni, Georgia?
Bologna. Right next to Bologna. No, so Giorgia Meloni, the Italian...
Apparently, like reincarnation of Mussolini.
Yeah,
from what I hear.
Watch out.
I get my talking points from the New York Times.
Spiced things up a bit. Epstein didn't kill himself. I was going to go with Nordstream 2. Can't wait for Nordstream 3. It's
Nordstream, Epstein. It's got a nice little ring to it. I like it.
It rhymes. And they both didn't blow themselves up or kill themselves. And for my main topic, or our main topic, I was thinking about talking about how brave and fearless Lizzo is wearing a Swiss cheese outfit.
You serious, Clark? Lizzo?
I'm losing I'm losing confidence as we speak. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to my backup, which is more serious, which is Fauci fucking up again and paying quote unquote hush money to Wuhan again. But
that sounds a little bit more topical.
Yeah, it sounds a little more like
not the dental floss that Lizzo likes to parade on stage.
And everyone going, "You're pretty. You're always pretty."
All right. Well, listen, I like those topics. I think we should get to it. Welcome to Weapons of Meme Destruction Podcast, episode 115, which can be found at wmdpodcast.com/115. You can find it on any podcast app. Just search Weapons of Meme Destruction, and it'll be right there at the top. Well, it'll be at the top if you're watching it in early to mid-October 2022, which is when this was recorded. If you're watching it after the fact, you got to scroll down there in chronological order. You'll figure it out. The videos can be found on YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey. Again, just search Weapons of Meme Destruction. You'll find us on all of those platforms, thanks to our video guy who shall not be named. And
he chooses to remain nameless.
If you would like to link up with us on our other social medias, Twitter, Instagram, and we now have another TikTok page.
You'll never guess the name.
And I actually forget the exact name. I'm going to look it up at one of these times when David's on a big, long diatribe in the episode, and I'll let you know. I forget what it is now. You'll find it out at the end of the episode, so you got to stick around for that.
It's 3.0.
I know, but I don't know if it's WMD Podcast or Weapons of, I don't remember
which one's capitalized. I got it.
Yes, I got to figure that out. I'll figure that out. David's going to talk.
I'm definitely the diatribe one. Yeah, but, I go on big, long spiels.
While he's doing that, that's when I'll figure it out. So, with that being said, David, Culture Corner.
Sir.
You mentioned something named Giorgia Meloni?
Yes.
What happened with her?
Giorgia Meloni. Apparently, she's a conservative member, or a member of the Conservative Party in Italy. Is that what they call it on the streets? Mambo Italiano. In Italy. And apparently, they are up in arms about a conservative winning is it a presidency? Or is it like what? Is it a prime minister? Is it like I'm not. Is it a dictator? I'm pretty sure seeing as
it's prime minister.
Democracy was kind of formed over there. You think that they'd have
that would be Greece, but you're close.
Rome was a republic. Where do you think all the Republicans come from?
Yeah. But yes, she won a plurality of the vote, 43%. Now, according to the establishment media in the United States and around the world, apparently 43% is a fringe group, right? Because she's fringe, she has fringe views, she's just an all-around terrible, evil person, and pretty much the reincarnation of Mussolini, and you should be terrified, citizen. That's the general kind of room temperature IQ take that you'll get from the New York Times or people sitting in high places at the European Union, et cetera, et cetera. Now, David and I have some thoughts on this and, the hypocrisy of going so vigorously after Meloni and castigating her in such a way, because let's just start out right off the top and just play the whole gender / demographic politics that they enjoy playing so much and point out that this is a victory for women everywhere, because when she takes office, she will be the first ever female prime minister of Italy.
Yay!
That's something to celebrate,
Progress! Right? Woo! Progressives, take your dicks out, wave them around, or your vagina, or whatever you sexually identify as waving around.
So, and to that, I have to say the wailing and gnashing of teeth about Meloni, which we'll get to some of her positions a little bit later, but the screaming from the rooftops about how terrible it is that her party won a plurality of the vote is kind of odd, right? Because I always hear from progressives, and this is especially the subset of progressives, the more feminist-leaning ones. You'll always hear these little memes that float around where they say something like, well, men have been running the world for a long time, and look where we are. It's pretty terrible. If women ruled the world, we probably wouldn't have any war. Poverty wouldn't exist. It's time for women to take power. We heard a lot of this in 2016 with Hillary Clinton. That's why the fact that she was a woman was at least 50%, if not 51% of the reason why you needed to vote for her. And the fact that you didn't probably makes you some sort of misogynist.
I'm pretty sure they forgot about Marie Antoinette.
Well, she wasn't calling the shots. Well, it was still the king. But the point is that, yes, as historically illiterate as it is to say that there's never been female leaders in all of history, again, that's just factually incorrect. But taking them at face value, and they claim that, well, if there were more women calling the shots, that the world would be fantastic. Yet it is a lot of these very same people that when Italy gets its first female prime minister, she is a fascist, she is far
Nazi?
right, she's terrible.
Nazi?
Well,
is she a Nazi?
Again, these people are historical illiterates. So again, linking Nazism implicitly and explicitly with fascism is not accurate. But without getting into the weeds too much, yes, that's kind of what they're getting at.
Okay.
They want to not just invoke images of Mussolini, but also Hitler.
We don't want to bring up our dark past, but we want to make sure that that this person is that dark past that we're referring to.
Right. Now, the outrage over Meloni getting elected in Italy makes a little bit more sense when you peel the couple layers of the onion back and realize these people for who they are, who David and I point out all the time. And what I mean by these people, I mean progressives, things like that, is that for all of their...
What the hell you mean? These people.
Yeah, those people. Is for all their flowery rhetoric about diversity and inclusion and equality and all of these high ideals that they want to the nth degree, as long as it winds up with them being in power, is that they don't give a damn about equality. They don't give a damn about diversity if what we're talking about is opinion. They want absolute, hook, line, and sinker, lockstep. You have to have the same opinions on everything as them. And it doesn't matter if you're a woman or if you're from some other allegedly marginalized group. If you don't have that level of groupthink that they require, then all of that diversity goes out the window. Wherever you place in the oppression Olympics doesn't matter because you have the wrong opinions. And anybody who, thinks that your opinions aren't so crazy is, persona non grata right along with you. So once again, it's only a couple layers of the onion to realize that these people are utterly and completely full of shit. But it just comes out when they attack Meloni, despite her checking a lot of other, feminist progressive bells and whistles. The fact that she says the wrong things or has the wrong opinions, well, then the rest of it just goes by the wayside.
Well, just to harken on to that lockstep, believing everything. The cool thing about believing everything that they say is that every day it fucking changes. It moves further down that path of progressivism. It progresses down the path of progressivism. So you will never actually, like to steal a phrase from everybody that's ever said it, you'll never be woke enough. Tomorrow you'll have to be more woke. And then you'll have to be more woke the next day and the next day. And eventually you can't keep up with the inevitable march to your own doom. And eventually you fall back and then all of a sudden you're canceled because you're not woke enough. Because you said the wrong pronoun at the wrong time to the wrong thing. Whatever. Plants sexually identify as birds now. So you have to say all plants fly. Or else you'll hurt the plant's feelings and it won't blossom. And then this, good job, Dane. This year's harvest of wheat was down because you didn't believe plants could fly if they believed that they really could.
Yeah.
So now you're leading to the starvation of grandmothers around the world.
Right.
Thank you, Dane.
I know. Listen, I know. Listen, the fact that
such a piece of shit.
I don't take it's not worth pulling my hair out over the election of Giorgia Meloni in Italy makes me probably fascist adjacent. As a matter of fact, the fact that I am a straight white male sitting here in a vest and tie.
Why should we even have an opinion?
Fascist, so.
We shouldn't even have an opinion.
We're clearly not entitled to one.
No. Fuck us.
But let's get into why there is so much outrage. Because again, unless you're following Italian politics, which again, to be fair,
super advocate,
we had to do our research on.
Can't get enough of it
on this topic to at least bring you the bare bones of the situation of what's going on. Because believe me, it is deeper than what we're just going to discuss in these couple minutes. Let's just get into some of the viewpoints that Meloni has, some of her policy positions that has progressives pulling their hair out about her winning in Italy. So she is very pro-family. She encourages people to have children as opposed to this movement that children are terrible and that human beings are a blight on planet Earth and need to stop procreating. She's very pro-Italian over non-Italians that don't act in the interest of Italians. So, for example, EU globalists who want everything to be done the way the EU wants it to be done, even if it harms Italians, she's not in favor of that. And I mean, shocker, right? Absolute shocker that the Italian people would look around and say, I don't think some of these interest groups that are outside of Italy and don't have to live under our living conditions, they don't seem to be making our lives too much better. I think I'm going to go with the lady who says that she wants to help us and who actually has direct control over us as one of our elected representatives, not somebody sitting off 1,000 miles away in Brussels. I think she'll be popular in this country. Shocker that the Italian people thought that somebody who says, you know what, it's okay to be Italian. And you don't have to apologize for being Italian. And you don't have to constantly supplicate and lay your feet or lay down in prostration at the overlords in Brussels and stuff like that. And that we can govern our own affairs here in Italy.
And if you've ever
that, she's a fascist.
And if you've ever been to New York, you know how proud Italians can be that they are Italian. There's a lot of pride that courses through the Italian veins, let me tell you. Hair and pride, that's what they're known for, is chest hair and pride. And gold chains. And
listen, I don't know if David has strong feelings on this one way or another. The only thing I'll say is I know you're probably thinking, well, Dane, you're an ANCAP, so you don't really care about states in general or, vague ideals of nationalism and having national pride and where you're from and all that kind of stuff. And to that, I'd say you're true. However, I'm not at all shocked that people seem more loyal to those that they grew up around. And it just moves out in concentric circles, right? So you have more loyalty, love, trust, and affection and care for their well-being of the people in your immediate family. And then your friends, and then your community, and then your county, and then your state, and then your national government. And it just keeps going in that direction. So should we be at all that shocked that even if can sit here and say, without being contradictory, that states are inherently illegitimate in the way they exercise their authority, that doesn't mean that people aren't going to have more loyalty and devotion and want to see people fare better the closer they are to them in proximity, both familially, geographically, etc. That's not a shocking revelation. And the fact that Meloni would campaign on saying, yeah, I want to govern in a way that benefits Italians, not whatever's going on with the EU in Brussels that hurts Italians, I'm going to put Italians first. That's not a terrible thing. Anybody in any country around the world can and should be able to do and say that without being labeled some super ultra nationalist fascist. Well, it's just absurd.
Human beings need belonging, and they need to feel attached to something. And the further away from something that you are, the less attached you are to it. Just, through human nature and society. Like, if you truly view your government as your brethren or some faraway establishment as closer to you than your own family, then I bet you more often than not, you feel very alone. Because to start in the family, to start at home, that's a sense of belonging. To go further out, friends, that's another sense of belonging. To go with your it grows outward, but it starts from the inside. But if you just go, I'm attached to the thing that's the very furthest thing from me, you're going to feel very isolated most of the time. And that's why this kind of progressivism works. It's like you have to hold everyone else accountable because you're so hurt and your feelings matter the most to you. And the only other thing that you're really attached to is so much more big that it doesn't even know you exist. So you're going to feel outraged and you're going to want to demand respect. And it breeds contempt within humans. And I don't like that.
Right. And I mean, that's the point that we're trying to make is like, it's not a shocker when Meloni campaigns against other Italian politicians who have sold out the interests of Italians to people who forget being of Italian descent, aren't from Italy, never lived in Italy, and have no care one way or another of what policies impact Italy. And very many EU policies impact Italy directly. And her point is to say, listen, I'm an Italian. I'm proud to be an Italian. That's okay. She does dip her toe into the culture war stuff by saying, I am also a woman and I am a mother. And I'm also proud of those titles too. And there's no reason why I should feel unproud of those or why I should accept the label of birthing person or anything like that with this whole, wholesale destruction of traditional gender norms with males and females, et cetera, et cetera. It's the fact that she holds those opinions is what drives progressives crazy because, again, just like we experienced with the little sticky thing for the last 2 years that were supposed to be put into your arm whether you liked it or not. Even though they got 70 to 80% compliance virtually right off the bat, they obsessed compulsively over those last 20 or 30% of us who held out because they cannot have anybody, not even the single blade of grass, disagree with whatever their agenda is. If they want to move in this direction and you move in the opposite direction or just purely stand still, they will lose their minds over it. And in a very real sense, in a very conservative sense, which again, to these people, conservative means far right, Meloni is just saying, listen, I'm proud to be an Italian. I'm proud to be a mother. I'm proud to be a woman. And that's okay if you feel that pride too. And if you elect me, I'm going to govern in your interest. Now, whether she does or not is up for debate, and we'll see what she does actually in office. But the point is that the Italian people should not be chastised for electing somebody on that promise. She should not be chastised for telling the people what they want to hear. That's what politicians do. She should be judged on her actions when she's actually in office. Let's see. But this whole idea of don't even give her a chance, call her a fascist before she even steps foot in the office is just the whole everything that disagrees with me is racist or bigotry, and therefore I don't have to talk to you. That's how progressives analyze situations, and that's why they always get everything wrong and why they're blindsided by the likes of a Trump or a Meloni.
Well, that's the whole purple hair mentality, is that they expect you to absolutely adhere and comply to their wants and wishes, but to use their own rhetoric against them. She identifies as a mother. She identifies as a woman. She's not going to tell you her pronouns because you can just assume them. She's okay with you assuming them. So you need to give her that right. But they don't play that game. They don't play fair. That's the whole point of progressives. If you actually live by what the things you say you live by, we wouldn't have a problem because you guys wouldn't ever cause a ruckus. If somebody misgendered you, you would fucking go, you know what? I'll understand that they don't see the world how I feel it. I'm just going to ask them politely to call me this other thing. And normally humans will just do that. But no, that's not the game they play. So they attack somebody that doesn't absolutely adhere to their ideology, as Dane alluded to earlier. And you can't work with that. Like we have to both come to the same table. And if you're not playing the same card game that I am, and you just tell me that you win every time, I'm not going to play with you. That's the kid in the back. I mean, you're slowly turning into the kid in the back seat that dad's not going to listen to you anymore. Dad's going to keep driving the car forward. You can either hop on and work with us or get the fuck out of the car. Start your own little country. You did, by the way.
Kiddo.
You did, by the way. Chaz. Does anybody remember Chaz? They tried it.
It was utopia on Earth, as what I remember from it.
Yeah, there weren't murders. There wasn't blatant racism. There wasn't. No, they did great.
So listen, all I'll say to put a nice little bow on the end of this conversation is cry and scream and throw a fit all you want, progressives. But listen, you've pushed the pendulum too far because watch out, France and Austria are next. And the snowball is going to keep rolling. You're going to get this pushback when you continuously make people sacrifice their families, their close friends, the ties that bind them, and that they feel naturally close and akin to. When you constantly make them sacrifice those relationships for your global, sweeping, world-changing agendas, shocker when you get some pushback.
Doesn't that sound like a toxic girlfriend to you? What's the first thing a chick does that's bad for you? Everyone that's in your circle that's like, hey, man, are you sure this? All of a sudden, I don't like him anymore. He smells. He farts too much. I don't want you hanging out with him anymore. He's a bad influence. Like, cut till you're just stuck with her. Yep. And then all of a sudden, she's bored with you. She got everything she wanted. Now she's going to leave. That's you in a nutshell if you follow this ideology. Yep. You're going to be alone.
As you should be. So on to Epstein did not kill himself. We're talking the destruction of the Nordstream 2 pipeline. And what we're talking about is what you're not supposed to talk about. And what you're not supposed to talk about is, use that little bit of gray matter between your ears and think with a little bit of common sense and say, I'm being told one of two things here, or I'm being presented with arguments, not necessarily being told anything. I mean, there are facts that play into this situation that would bear on what the ultimate conclusion, which one is more likely than not. But based on your assessment of that, using your critical thinking skills, which again, according to the regime's mouthpieces in the media, you're not allowed to do, you might come to some conclusions that they don't approve of. And believe me, when you do, they will let you know about it. So a couple weeks have gone by since this one happened. So it's not exactly front of news, but it still is a big issue because it moves.
Well, it wasn't front of news to begin with.
Well, I think it was at the time. Yeah, I saw it everywhere.
They covered it, but they weren't really covering it.
Well,
it wasn't like Trump being syndicated with the Russia program.
No, but they were covering it by saying the Russians did it, the Russians did it, the Russians did it.
Yeah, and then
Yeah.
In other news.
So anyway, the blowing up of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, which for those of you who don't know, is the undersea pipeline which connects Russia directly with Germany. And it is to get natural gas energy, cheap energy, to the European continent. Well, the middle of the European continent, obviously Germany from Russia. Now, this is a jointly held infrastructure project between both Germany and Russia, and that's going to be important for a Biden quote about this, which we'll bring up here in a second. It's a jointly held infrastructure project. So it's not solely under the control of Russia, and it's not solely under the control of Germany. Both have a vested interest in this thing being an efficient use of the allocation of energy resources. And basically how it works is on Russia's end, when Germany or the European Union wants to buy fossil fuels to power, for energy for the European continent, Russia basically flips the switch, lets the gas go, and Germany accepts it, and then they pay Russia. Now, obviously, as you know, because of the Ukraine war, this is a no-no. We're not supposed to buy things from Russia because by buying things from them is funding their war effort. And they're terrible, evil, no good, very bad people. And Putin needs to die and blah, 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 blah. So don't buy any gas from Russia.
All of these are facts.
Well, you may have heard in the news over the last few weeks that energy prices are skyrocketing on the European continent, in particular in Germany, where, without getting into the weeds of that, German politicians for years have been moving to greener and greener energy policies, basically moving away from fossil fuels up to very recently shutting nuclear plants off in favor of renewables. Well, as we always warn you about, not just us, but as is always warned about, green energy is not super reliable. And so, supply and demand. You don't have enough energy production. It's getting ready to go into the winter season in Germany. There's a high demand for energy. So energy prices are skyrocketing. Now, just based on these set of facts, it would behoove both Russia and Germany to work together in terms of Russia has the energy, Germany needs the energy. The war is what it is, but they should work together for the betterment of at least the German people, right? So they don't have to pay their entire paycheck just to heat their houses for 5 minutes. But the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline doesn't exactly allow for that. And we're supposed to take from this that Russia did it. Russia blew up the pipeline, despite the fact that Russia gets at least some benefit from the pipeline being operational.
Well, who hasn't told them their wonderful wife, husband, whatever the fuck else you might be attached to, that you live in the same domicile to? Honey, I think we left the kitchen light on. I'm going to go shut it off. They trundle down there. It's probably 11 o'clock at night. They're a little sleepy-eyed. They're not paying too much attention. They just go, clear! And throw a hand grenade in there and blow up their entire kitchen. Because goddamn, the light's off. Wouldn't it make more sense just to turn off the switch? Like, just to make sure it's operational? Like, if you control the switch, you don't need to blow the whole thing up. So, I don't know what possible benefit, other than to play this complete psyop game to where, like, the Russians did it to make it look like the U.S. did it, so that the U.S. would benefit more financially, which would make them soft, which would make Russia more virulent and strong and be able to take them over very quickly.
Yeah.
Fucking 3D chess, son. Okay? Yeah. We're not playing checkers. There's no kings out here. It's just the taken.
Now, as David said, if Russia truly wanted to shut down the pipeline entirely, they have a switch on their end. They just shut it down. They don't put anything through the pipe. There's no reason to destroy it. So when some people started to point out the incentives on both sides here, they started to think, well, you know, we've been told that Russia were the ones that did it. We don't really have any proof of that. But, I mean, of course, nobody on the Western side, whether it be Germany or the United States or Great Britain or any of those allied NATO member nations, none of them would do it, right? Because, again, in the very Manichaeanist way that the whole Russia-Ukraine war has been talked about, is that it's light versus dark. and that to blow up a potential source of energy for German citizens who are being crushed with high energy bills would be a very bad, evil, terrible, no good, very bad thing to do, right? So of course the good side didn't do it. Only the bad, dark, evil, terrible, no good, bad side did it, Russia. Now, when some people started to point out that the incentives don't seem to align because A, as David said, Russia could just turn off the pipeline. B, Russia, if we take the regime's mouthpieces at face value and they say, Ukraine is winning, they're pushing back, Russia's being backed into a corner, yada, yada, yada. Okay, let's take that narrative at face value. If you're Russia, just think for 5 seconds. I know you're not supposed to do this, but try to put yourself in the other side's shoes for 5 seconds and say, if I'm Vladimir Putin or if I'm Russia, I have a very big trump card up my sleeve. And that card is, I have cheap, reliable energy. And I know the European continent needs it. Now, the European continent, with the US backing, has decided to put massive sanctions on me, which hurt me politically if I'm Vladimir Putin, or me as an entire country if I'm the Russian citizens. But I always have this trump card. So if I want those sanctions lifted, or if I want to not be punished so much for what we feel is a justified war in Ukraine, my trump card is, hey, Germany, you need some energy? It's getting cold over there. Your people are freezing. I can just flip the switch over here. You just say the word. Oh, but if you say the word, I'm going to need you to ease up on those sanctions on me. But if I'm Russia and I blow up the pipeline, I have now just taken that massive trump card out of my hand. I've lit it on fire.
It's 3D chess. You don't understand. I'm going to make you think that I'm all hurting for money. And then when you come in to kill me, I'm going to kill all the rest of you. Because I'm strong. I'm faking an injury. Oh, I can't lift my right arm. And then crack right over the top. Dumbass. Why don't you think about that, Dane?
Yeah, I guess that my version of chess only takes place on, a flat board.
America.
I can't think too many steps ahead. But again, using your gray matter and critically thinking for 5 seconds, and I know it's hard to do, but putting yourself in the other person's shoes, it doesn't seem like you would, in Russia's position, caring for only Russia's interest, regardless of the evilness of their actions, why they would want to take essentially their queen off of the chessboard by blowing up Nordstream 2. Now, if you ask that question, according to the New York Times, you're a Russia sympathizing, probably bought and paid for, terrible, Trump supporting whatever. If you simply ask that question without going any deeper and looking at the other side of the coin is, well, who might have an incentive to blow this up? If I agree with you for 5 seconds that maybe Russia doesn't have that much of incentive, who does?
Well, the thing is like, and we bring it back to this all the time on the podcast, is like, when did it become illegal to question? When did it become wrong to not just believe everything that you heard verbatim on the first try? Like, when did it become, I thought there was no dumb questions. There's no dumb questions, right? That's what you're always told in elementary school, allegedly. High school, allegedly. But like, now every question that you get, it's like the teacher's mocking, like, class, look at this stupid ass. I would blow up a pipeline to financially benefit myself and push my biggest adversary into a corner that they'll probably never make it out of. What? What? Come on, guys. All right, get out in the hallway, you fucking idiot. I can't even teach you algebra today. Oh.
Yeah. Well,
America. Like, I don't know.
Now, let's examine the other side of the coin if we're trying to figure out who did this. The United States, current sitting president Joe Biden, in February of 2022, shortly before the Russian invasion into Ukraine, said in open, you can look up the clip. We'll link it at wmdpodcast.com/115. We'll put it under the videos on YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey. You can watch the video yourself. Joe Biden in a press conference said that we, the United States, will, if Russia invades, will shut down Nord Stream.
And they ask him, how are you going to do that?
And an astute reporter says, but Mr. President, how are you going to do that? Because it's not just Russia that controls the line. Germany has invested its own money into it. This is Germany, an ally of the United States, has invested its own money and has control over at least a portion of that infrastructure. How are you going to shut down Nord Stream 2? It wouldn't seem like you would want to do that to your ally. You would think that you would want their input in the situation.
Go on.
And Biden responds with, trust me, we will shut down Nord Stream. Now, again, that's a sitting U.S. president. And I just posit to the regime mouthpieces who now point out anybody who brings this up as probably a Russian sympathizer is, I would say, if Trump were in office and he were to make a statement like that, and then Nord Stream gets blown up. And remember, Trump was supposed to be the one who was the crazy, unhinged maniac who was going to make World War III happen. If he said that and Nord Stream blew up, would you not be rushing to the soapboxes to say, see, he did it. He made a threat. Da, 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 da. Now, again, I know Biden's your guy, and I know that his meaningless threat was just that, meaningless.
Let's be honest. If Biden's your guy, you're probably not watching this fucking podcast. Let's be honest.
But it wasn't just Biden. Former undersecretary of the Secretary of
Take it again.
The U.S. State Department Undersecretary Victoria Nuland, which we have. This isn't her first foray into the whole Russia-Ukraine thing. We talked about her several episodes ago and her involvement in the 2013 Euromaidan protest in Ukraine.
You're my dad?
Yes. Which was essentially a political coup overthrowing Viktor Yanukovych, who was a pro-Russian, democratically elected leader of Ukraine.
Tennis player, right?
Yeah, that guy. She made similar statements before Nord Stream was blown up. And we have current sitting U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken saying these same sort of things just a few weeks ago. So when you have a president, a former Secretary of State, Undersecretary, and the current Secretary of State all kind of speaking from the same playbook, it would seem to suggest to you that if the United States didn't blow up the pipeline, it seems to think that it would have a vested interest in that pipeline no longer existing. I mean, that's what they're telling you. So if they didn't do it and it just happened by some random or if Russia did it to themselves, the United States isn't exactly upset about this occurrence, at least according to the sitting president, sitting Secretary of State, and former Undersecretary. But again, you're not supposed to ask any of these questions because to assume that the light side of the ledger did anything wrong that would harm the German people, let alone the Russian people, is to make you a Russian Putin sympathizer.
Don't you understand? This is a very fluid situation. They probably haven't had this plan in place since 2014 or even been thinking about it since then. So and not to mention the fact that they're sympathizers. They're trying to help Ukraine out. So they're going in there just trying to help them out. If it is true that the United States sabotaged that thing, it's not like there's another Republican person that was in the White House with another cabinet around, 2006 around, that came out and said that there were might have been plans to do this a long time ago. But it's not important, Dane. And I'm not speaking about. I'm not speaking about Condoleezza Rice saying this in 2014.
Hey, listen, David, I'm actually glad that you brought her up because in 2014, she wasn't Secretary of State as she was under George W. Bush.
She wasn't even in office.
She had no power. She was, but as secretaries of state come and go, generally speaking, they go to speaking events and they go to conferences and their opinion is valued in some circles. And isn't it rather odd, not to David and I and those of you who are loyal listeners and watchers of the WMD podcast.
Don't you think?
But it's like that old Tom Woods law that no matter who you elect, you wind up with John McCain. And that Condoleezza Rice is a Republican under former President George W. Bush as Secretary of State. Yet she's saying 6 years ago essentially the same things that Victoria Nuland and Anthony Blinken and Joe Biden are saying. And in the fact that it is in the United States national interest to make sure that the United States is the sole supplier of energy to the European continent over and above Russia. If we were engaged in some sort of armed struggle, so to speak, or if not armed, at least a proxy war going on in, Ukraine, and that there's actually a financial hot war going on between Russia and the West, led by the United States in the form of sanctions and things like that, is that Condoleezza Rice, as a Republican in 2014, is speaking from the same playbook as Newland, Blinken, and Biden. And what that shows you is what we bring up on this podcast frequently, is that no matter who you elect, you wind up with John McCain. The foreign policy establishment consensus in DC does not change. It does not matter who you elect. That unelected bureaucracy that has vested interests in making sure that their military-industrial complex keeps pumping out the tanks, planes, bombs, and bullets and keeps getting paid to the tunes of billions and trillions of dollars from the American people to constantly gin up conflict all around the world that has absolutely precisely dick all to do with the actual national security of the American people who they're supposed to be responsive to, that those people and their policies never change. They always get their way, and their way is constant struggles, constant provocations for war, constant boogeymaning of somebody else. If it's not the Kaiser, then it's Hitler, and then if it's not Hitler, then it's Stalin, and then if it's not Stalin, then it's Saddam, and then if it's not Saddam, then it's Assad, and if it's not Assad, then it's Putin, and so on and so forth. And there's always a monster to slay. Some of those monsters are more real than others, but there's always monsters to slay. And wouldn't you just be totally shocked that this group of people, this foreign policy establishment consensus that never changes, are always the ones that have the solutions, and you should look to them and let them do whatever they want carte blanche. And they never make mistakes. They never do anything underhanded. They never, blow up a pipeline and blame it on their enemies. They don't do any of that ever. They're always to be trusted, and they're just the best people on earth. And they make all the right decisions.
Just to bow tie it, you mentioned Russia's biggest exports were predominantly oil, gas, and some minerals, right? What's the United States' biggest export?
Pharmaceuticals?
War.
Oh, of course, yeah.
War goods, war sundries.
Yeah.
When we were telling Saddam, we're behind you, but then we gave the Kurds a bunch of weapons behind his back, We've been doing it for a long time.
And his alleged weapons of mass destruction were weapons that we sold him to fight the Iranians in the 80s.
We might have had the receipts. That's why we thought that they were there. But God only knows where they're there. Where they were when we went in. Excuse me. So.
And, before we move on to the main, I just want to tie this together with, here is the Epstein moment. Here's the historical example, which isn't an exactly one-to-one comparison, but it really crystallizes for you that history didn't start yesterday, and that these people do the same types of shit again and again and again. In World War I, again, number one, not two, so put Hitler and Nazis and people on train cars out of your mind. World War I was simply, old graybeards on the European continent that are fighting over centuries-old jealousies, right? This isn't racially charged or anything like that World War II was. The Entente powers versus the Axis powers. The Entente powers, or both sides, wanted desperately for the United States to come in on their side. And so before that's going to happen, they needed to fight a propaganda war before they got the U.S. to help them fight a real war. And when Great Britain declared war on Germany in World War I, the very first act of war they did, before they dropped a bomb or fired a single bullet, they cut the transoceanic telegraph line between Germany and the United States. Now, that would seem from a military strategic objective not to be a super high priority. But when you think about what it really was and how that war progressed and the propaganda that was pumped across the Atlantic from Great Britain to the United States to eventually bring the U.S. in, which helped the Entente powers win that war, it is an absolute hegemony over the narrative that's going on about the war. When the Germans couldn't communicate directly with the United States, the British had carte blanche to basically characterize the war in any way they wanted. They came up with fanciful tales about Germans bayoneting babies in their bassinets and cutting off the breasts of women and for no reason other than to just be absolutely barbaric. And the Kaiser was essentially a demon. And all of these, propaganda narratives that the British pumped into the United States until the United States ultimately went in. Now, if it was capable of blaming the Germans for the cutting of their own transcontinental telegraph line, I'm sure the British would have done that. But that's way too obvious to say that they would have no vested interest in doing that. But don't let it be forgotten that they will, and what I mean by they is not just the British or the United States, but the people that are always looking for war, they will do whatever it takes to make sure that they have narrative control over whatever it is they want you to do. And in this case, although it's not a communication line between Russia and the West, by blowing up Nord Stream 2, it harms Russia way more, and it harms the German people, but it harms Russia way more than the United States or any of the other NATO powers. And it gives them a convenient narrative to say Russia did it. And much in the telegraph cutting way, the mainstream media will cut off the conversation when you try to suggest maybe the incentives align for the United States or the West to have done this and not necessarily Russia. They've been doing it since even before World War I, but that's one big classic example. And so next time somebody tries to shut you down and say, well, there's no way the US would have done this. That's just too terrible. The Russians did it and blah, blah, blah. Bring up the cutting of the transcontinental telegraph line between Germany and the United States in World War I and know that they have to have narrative control from start to finish. And they're doing the same thing here. History didn't start yesterday. They use the same playbook over and over again.
Well, it's a good thing that we live in a society where all of that is just conjecture and they would never actually do this and they're always honest with us, meaning, the people that delineate information like the media. But anyway, on to Lizzo and how brave that she is for wearing that piece of shit fishnet stocking, and I had to look at it and tell her that she was so beautiful.
David, I'm easily confused too, because when I think of Lizzo, I also see Anthony Fauci.
I know. Are they related?
I think so.
Do you think so?
Yeah.
Have I seen them in a picture together like that?
Yeah.
Wearing two masks and devil horns.
So in today's main part of the episode, we're talking about, it's a two-parter. Not really a two-parter. They feed into each other. Fauci, I don't know if you heard about this, David. He got $5 million richer throughout the pandemic. Did you hear about this?
Fucking way.
$5 million.
Wow.
I guess that was just
that's just for doing a good job.
Yeah.
Doing a good job. Well, he should have given him more. And I would hate to think that he was hedging bets for people that were paying him and all they paid him was $5 million.
Right. Now, this is according to openthebooks.com, which is
privilege.
I know.
Privilege.
It is a watchdog organization that looks at the books of all the way from government agencies down to individual government actors, operators, bureaucrats, etc. And basically holds them accountable, right? The government is supposed to be accountable to the people. Well, Open the Books does that. And they analyzed Fauci's net worth. So we're not saying that the United States government paid him a $5 million bonus because of his performance during COVID. And we're not saying that Pfizer and Moderna literally wrote him a check for $5 million. But we're saying that his assets, from his stock holdings to everything else that goes into somebody's net worth, expanded by $5 million throughout COVID. Now, I know that Fauci is, in the entire American bureaucracy, the highest paid employee. I don't know exactly what he makes a year, but I venture to say that it's not $2.5 million. So for his wealth to expand by $5 million over that period of time, I mean...
Did he start a Kickstarter?
Yeah. It's funny you say that because I think that a lot of the Fauci cultists probably would have given him money
they
via Kickstarter.
I mean, if he had just named himself Anthony the Science Fauci and just started a Kickstarter, probably COVID would have probably only lasted 1.5 years instead of the whole 2, 3, 4 that's continuing to exist.
So I just looked it up. Fauci is estimated to make about $480,000 a year from his government job.
So he invested properly.
It's a pretty far cry from $5 million.
Might have some land that he's renting out or leasing, or maybe he had land that struck oil. You never know. Probably definitely
not. But
definitely not that. But like, it's possible. If a man can be a woman and a woman can be a man, all bets are off.
That is true. That is true. But you'll be shocked to learn, listeners and viewers, that that's not even the biggest point of this topic.
He probably consulted Pelosi and followed her investment. That's how he did it. Okay, there we go. So he got his measly 400 and turned it into 5 million by following her stock tips.
I mean, she is the greatest stock investor of our time.
Unprecedented. If there was a Tom Brady of stock events or
she'd
investments,
be the GOAT.
She can't miss.
For sure.
Is it 4th down and 13? Hold my beer.
So that's not even the biggest point that we're trying to point out here.
Wait, did I just fucking compliment Tom Brady?
I think so.
Oh my God. What have I done? It truly is.
It was a backhanded comment because you're not exactly celebrating Pelosi's ability to do that. And as a matter of fact, if you want to feel better about it, you're essentially calling her a cheater, and you consider Tom a cheater. So
thanks, you just made me feel better for the first time in my life.
You're welcome.
Thanks, buddy.
The biggest thing that we want to point out about this is you're never going to guess who the NIH just funded again with a $3 million grant. And again, go back to wmdpodcast.com/47 or listen to episode 47 wherever you get this podcast.
We didn't have visuals yet, so we weren't.
Yes, we were audio only. I mean, you can still see the video on YouTube, Rumble, Odyssey. It's not us. It's just a still shot of the logo. But I digress. Is on episode 47, we talked about Fauci's emails. And we talked about in those emails where some of the quid pro quo existed between Fauci and some of the more suspect players in the whole "how did COVID come about" thing. And what you'll hear in that episode, if you haven't heard of these names before, is EcoHealth Alliance, which is currently still run by a man by the name of Peter Daszak, who had submitted a report to DARPA to get funding for the research that ultimately culminated in the COVID research at Wuhan. And DARPA turned him down, but then he went to NIH, and NIH said, "Yeah, we don't see any problem with this. We don't think this violates the ban on gain of function research. Here's some money. Go study away, Peter." Well, all of those red flags notwithstanding about EcoHealth Alliances or Peter Daszak's personal involvement in creating the COVID fiasco that eventually came to being, that even right after, and again, these people will tell you COVID's not over. Without COVID even being over, according to these people, Fauci thinks it's a brilliant idea to give Peter Daszak and EcoHealth Alliance another $3 million.
Fun little side note.
Just recently.
Fun little side note. Like the vaxxers, the max vaxxers, like I think it's cute because I think they're starting to come around to like not thinking that it's that big a deal either. Because like it makes sense because like at first they're like, you have to get it or else you're gonna kill other people, and now they're like, well, you should get it because like cold and flu season's coming up, and you can get your flu shot right along with your COVID shot. So it's like it's convenient. So you might as well just get it while you're there. So like you get your flu shot too, don't you? So I mean, you might as well just get your COVID shot that's been tested on 8 mice, not even on humans. But you should probably get it.
Now.
I'm just saying, like, it's getting better. We're moving forward.
I know. Well, listen.
With no thanks to the science. Anthony, I just feel like in this corner, fighting for COVID.
Pharmaceutical companies.
The reigning, defending, Anthony, the science, Fauci. It's my best.
Chris, we are very sorry.
Bruce Buffer impersonation.
That's pretty damn good.
Well, I was, I wasn't as hyped as he was. I wasn't stomping, but
yeah.
Anyway, take it away, Jane. Sorry.
So, with that being said, you would think that maybe not so soon. Now, again, I don't remember if it was this year or next year, but Fauci is stepping down from his position. You know, the heat got turned up a little bit too hot. He doesn't want to stick around for it. So he's like, peace out, had a good run.
He's not defending the belt.
You know, bacon grease and hair grease, I'm out. Is that you would think that maybe he wouldn't want to, you know, start throwing money back to EcoHealth Alliance and Peter Daszak again, considering that, you know, all of the dust hasn't settled and we don't exactly know conclusively how much involvement him and that organization had in the whole COVID fiasco. David and I have our suspicions. A lot of other people do too. Fauci obviously won't admit to it, but suffice it to say that you listen to episode 47 and what was contained in Fauci's emails, you'll have some questions too. So you would think Fauci would want to distance himself from that individual in that group as much as possible. But again, like we said, he's stepping down. So maybe he's like, fuck it. I don't care. What are you going to do to me? Throw me in jail? I'm a part of the establishment. They don't ever come after people like me. And the other thing you're probably thinking is, well, guys, listen. I'm a pretty astute listener and viewer of WMD podcasts, and I know that NIH gets about $45 billion a year in funding.
And I'm about to fuck up this Thanksgiving dinner.
So $3 million compared to $45 billion is a pittance. Like, how much did he really give EcoHealth Alliance and Peter Daszak? And the first thing that we'll say to that is you have to look at the fact that not only did that group get money again in light of its involvement in COVID, potentially, but you have to look at what NIH chose not to fund with its $45 billion. In fact, by some, you know, data estimates or whatever, only 2% of total NIH funding throughout all of COVID went to things like, oh, I don't know, does it transmit on surfaces? How far do you have to be away from somebody to actually, you know, not catch it?
Is vitamin D deficiency correlated?
Are cloth face masks, you know, the best thing since sliced bread? Or as they, you know, CDC director Walensky later said, they're nothing more than a face decoration.
Is doggy style the only way you can have sex with your wife or girlfriend?
If your dying grandparents want to see the grandkids one last time, should they hug them through a plastic sheet, or will that really not do anything? What about this really big thing we keep hearing about called natural immunity, which, like, for millennia, virology has understood to be pretty important, but apparently
Fauci understood it.
Apparently, COVID, it didn't exist anymore.
A couple of years ago.
NIH spent 2% of its funding on those types of studies. So it's not just that they chose to fund EcoHealth Alliance and Peter Daszak again, but it's also what they chose not to study. They chose not to study, another big category is mitigation measures. Remember Dr. McCullough, who was shouting from the rooftops all throughout the beginning of COVID, saying, here are the things, the clinical practice things we need to do to make sure that the virus doesn't progress to a level that it could be life-threatening. People like that were shut down and studies like that weren't performed with NIH funding. I wonder why. Why was it that Fauci chose not to fund studies that could make the virus, at least the impact of it, more manageable, but chose to fund studies that, you know, come from EcoHealth Alliance or that, you know, back up the already accepted narrative that the vaccine was the one and only way to go out of the COVID pandemic? Well,
and I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, David, this was an exceptional time. Like, they had never seen this unprecedented thing happen before, and they were just trying to make quick decisions in the best direction that they could see based on the data that they were given. But what's it called again? The NIH stands for the National Institute of Health. And they're supposed to measure the health of our country, right?
Well, I mean, yes and no. They also work in tandem with the World Health Organization.
The name implies that their main priority numero uno is this nation, seeing as it's, you know, funded.
I don't think that's an unfair characterization.
No,
yes,
fair.
Go ahead.
So where were they during the opium epidemic?
Funding studies for pharmaceutical companies to pump out opioid-laden drugs.
The thing that was killing thousands and thousands of Americans a year, which, not unlike COVID, was detrimental to our society. Where were they then? One wonders, because I had never heard of the NIH, because I'm a dumb American, before coronavirus happened. But then all I heard was CDC, NIH, CDC, NIH, CDC, NIH. You shouldn't get into a car, says the NIH. You can't fly a plane, says the CDC. You have to put a mask on your dick, says the NIH. Like, what the fuck are we... Like, if you're invested in health, why didn't you study, like, I don't know, vitamin D, like all the things you mentioned? It seemed as though they were looking in a general direction that wasn't necessarily predicated on our health. Because I don't think that... and again, I'll say it with the government, I'll say it with everything else, they don't care about your health. If they cared about your health, you wouldn't be able to dump Coca-Cola down your throat at the rate that you do.
Not that we're saying the government should step in and take the Coca-Cola out of your hand.
Well,
you're an adult. You can make your own decisions.
Go ahead. But how many commercials did you see while you were locked at home for Burger King, McDonald's, Chick-fil-A?
And thank God they had Postmates to be able to bring it to your house.
Thank Christ. What was the national average of people that stayed at home during...
I think it was like 20 or 30 pounds people gained.
Yeah.
They gained a lot of weight.
And now that we know more because of the science and statistics...
Thanks to NIH funding, by the way.
No, we just found it out. The thing that we were saying the entire time, you and I, and then most of the population was saying, if you're fat and out of shape and unhealthy, this thing's going to fuck you up.
Or to sterilize that for David.
Don't sterilize it. I want to be able to impregnate people. Don't you sterilize me. Don't you chemically castrate me.
Because adipose tissue increases the cytokine storm, which makes the virus replicate faster and reach a threshold that puts it into the life-threatening category.
Don't say science at me. You're not Fauci. You're not the science.
No, I'm just regurgitating what I heard from Dr. McCullough.
All I'm saying is that when you're unhealthy, anything will fuck you up. When you have AIDS doesn't kill you. The common cold kills you because it suppresses your immune system. Like that, all you have to do is, hey, guys, we don't know what we're fucking with right now. Drink a lot of water, get some sunlight, do some push-ups, don't eat a lot of shitty food. That's all they had to say.
While we fund a whole bunch of research onto, preventative measures, as Dr. McCullough was saying, most of his focus at the beginning and middle of COVID was we need to find out what are the clinical steps, what are the preventative measures we need to tell people to do. And again, the classic one that David and I talk about, that he talked about a lot, is when you went out. Now, be honest with yourselves. How many people heard this? The first time I heard it was from him probably a year and a half into the pandemic. But again, he wasn't paraded all around the media like Fauci, but this would have been very important information. He said that one of the most important things, early interventions you could do is, let's say you went to a concert or a club or whatever, and you were around a bunch of people, and you didn't know who in the crowd, if anybody, had anything. The best thing you could do is go home that night, get a, whatever it's called, like a neti pot or whatever, and flush out your sinuses. Because before the virus actually gets to your lungs and gets to the areas of your body where it can replicate and become very problematic if you don't treat it, is you flush out your sinuses, you clear those viral particles from your system in the beginning. Now, does that guarantee that you're never going to get sick again? No, but it decreases the viral load to a level that maybe your body might be able to fight it off before it puts you on a ventilator. Now, that's a very simple thing that everybody could have been doing from day one. Yet people like Peter McCullough were having their medical license threatened for telling people this. And again, what's the worst thing that could happen if he's wrong? If he's wrong,
some people got some really clean sinuses.
They got some really clean sinuses, and they got COVID anyway. Because don't try to come at me and say, oh yeah, well, if you let him tell people that, they're just going to say, well, I guess I'll be safe from everything as long as I flush my sinuses, so I'm not going to take any precautions. Really? You think that's what everybody would have done?
I can't even get my girlfriend pregnant. I flushed my sinuses.
When everybody all over, every mainstream media source was saying mask up, 6 feet, yada, 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 when they were screaming at you to take 18,000 different precautionary measures, which a lot of people did, especially early on when we were trying to figure out what we were dealing with, if they could have added one extra thing into their regimen, it might have helped a lot of people and saved a lot of lives. Yet you didn't hear this from anybody until McCullough went on Joe Rogan. And thank God that he had the platform that he did for enough people to hear that and to say, wait a minute, it doesn't seem like our national health officials actually had our health at front of mind. It seems like they had money at front of mind because they pushed everything in the direction of the only way out of this situation is a jab in your arm. You can't take any preventative measures before we get to that point, because God forbid those preventative measures work. And people look around and say, well, I don't really need this jab. I'm as David would say, I'm healthy, I'm eating better, I'm getting plenty of sun, I'm taking these preventative measures which don't, require a prescription or for me to have to go to a hospital, et cetera, et cetera. They were all pushing away from that direction, and they were pushing in the direction that, well, lo and behold, made Dr. Fauci $5 million richer over the last 2 years.
But it's a good thing the Nordstream pipeline blew itself up.
Yeah.
Killed itself.
Well, and the last thing that, I wanted to say on this before I let David, have the last word is, I know we sound like a broken record on this podcast, and the reason is because...
But the reason is because they're a broken record. They do the same fucking thing all the time, and you just don't see it, for fuck's sake. I'm sorry.
Touche.
Sorry.
Is that what all of this goes back to? Fundamentally, what this is always about is accountability or lack thereof. Is that whether you look at simply the NIH's budget of $45 billion, where does that $45 billion come from?
And they don't
snap their fingers and it comes out of thin air.
That's not their account. That's what they get each year.
Every year. Right.
Every year of our taxpaying dollars.
That organization gets $45 billion, not voluntarily. It's taken from you via taxes. You try to resist paying those taxes that go to NIH, you're getting thrown in a cage. So it's coercively taken from you. And so right there, step one, before we get to any allocation of those resources, step one, there's no accountability because they don't have to earn those dollars. Step two, you ever seen Dr. Fauci's name on a ballot? I was told that democracy was the best thing since sliced bread. And the best thing about it is that I get a say in who has an impact on my life.
Sounds right.
Fauci ain't never been on a ballot. So where's his accountability to the American people in this system of democracy that we're supposed to hold as sacred?
He's been there for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. Who fucking knows? Where's the term limit on his position?
At least that long. So again, no accountability. When Fauci decides to allocate that $45 billion, where's the accountability on where it goes? Nowhere.
I've got some input.
What was his excuse for why this $3 million was paid to EcoHealth Alliance? Essentially legal blackmail, because if he doesn't give them the money, EcoHealth Alliance is going to sue them. Now, listen, I don't practice food and drug law. I don't practice this type of law. But I'm going to tell you right now, he's utterly and completely full of shit. There is no law on the books, whether a statute or just regular common law, that would allow somebody that applies to the government for funding to say, you're big, bad, mean government. You didn't give me funding. I'm going to sue you.
If that was the case, every fucking homeless person could sue every person that they've ever seen ever. Spare some change? No, I'm not. I don't have any change.
I'm suing your ass.
I'm going to sue your ass because I'm going to die because you didn't give me change. My whole point is, like, if Anthony Fauci was dictating and I had a point, or I had a voice, I'd want him to start with heart disease, cancer. Those are the things that killed more people during those 2 years, by the way, than COVID ever could. Overdoses.
And still
drug
continue
addiction.
to.
Pharmaceuticals that hurt people. I don't know. National Health or National Institute of Health should stop fucking things from hurting the...
And the unaccountability train keeps on rolling. What have we pointed out since the beginning of the pandemic about the fact that the pharmaceutical companies who made the thing that you shall not be named so we don't get banned or demonetized, that you're supposed to put in your
Just a
arm
little
and
prick.
not ask any questions, is they got exemption from liability for any injuries that come from said medical procedure from the government.
And all questions can be staved off for 75 years, by the way.
Again, no accountability. Now, when the government gives that exemption from liability, where's the accountability on the government that gives those exemptions from liability? Anywhere? Not just Fauci.
Bueller.
What about the people at the FDA who gave emergency use authorization? That's
a tongue twister. You got it. Want to try it one more time?
Any emergency use authorization.
There you go. Got it.
Any accountability for them for rushing it through? No. All along the lines, you have no accountability, and you have, as David and I always say, the record is broken, but as he's eloquently pointed out earlier, it's because they keep doing the same shit over and over again, and it's because we as the American people refuse to hold their feet to the fire, it's all about incentives. They're not accountable for those things. They can enrich themselves by gaming the system to be set up in their favor, and the American people have no say in the game. No matter what MSNBC tells you to be outraged about January 6th because, oh my God, democracy was attacked, and try to make you believe that you, the people, are your government and you have a say in how it operates, you don't. I don't know how many more times you have to be smacked in the face with the fact that you don't, but there are no incentives for these people that you have no control over, but have absolute control over you. There is no incentive for them to change. In fact, the only incentive they have is to act in their own self-interest, enrich themselves to your detriment, and get away with it scot-free.
And the whole point is they've bastardized the definition of democracy. Democracy does not happen without you, without me, without him. We, the population, are what make a democracy. But they don't listen to us anymore. They don't have our ideas in mind. They don't have our best interests in mind. But they consider themselves, as Anthony Fauci considers himself the science, they consider themselves democracy. They are not democracy. They will tell you that to the nth degree. But a king is only a king if you believe he's a king. A democracy only exists if everybody believes that democracy exists. When we start seeing a failing democracy, when we start seeing people on Capitol Hill that are running our country into the ground and against our wishes, we don't have a democracy. We have an oligarchy at best. And what's that other thing that's not so cool?
Dictatorship, tyranny, fascism, apparently.
Kinda. So, again, like, all roads point down that, or all arrows point down that road that we're going down. And if you truly believe that democracy is Capitol Hill, then we've already lost. That's all I'll say.
Well, listen, I know it seems like the record is stuck on the track of incentives. People will act according to the incentives that are placed in front of them. And that to any extent that we want to change things on a macro level about the way those that rule us, because again, I'm not so naive and completely, naive is where I'll leave it. I'm not so naive as to believe that my perfect world of a stateless society is going to happen anytime soon. I know that. I know that I am on, as they would say about Meloni. In that position, I'm actually on the fringe in terms of people who actually want that to happen. So, what can I do? What can you do? What can we all do to have better outcomes from the people that rule over us?
Join Weapons of Meme Destruction every weekend.
Definitely that. That is step number one.
Heartless plug.
Step number 2 is sharing with your friends and family. But is
step number 3.
Institute accountability. And in many respects, that means eliminating these positions which are completely closed off from accountability. Fauci's position, up until him being put under the microscope of COVID, his position was essentially insulated from accountability because nobody elected him. And then administrations just came and go and just leave him at his post doing his thing for decades. So you have to first change the structure of accountability and make people at every level of government, every single person that has any impact on your life to the most minute degree in terms of the state needs to be accountable. And the second thing is you have to change the incentive structure. You have to make it so that people acting in their own self-interest is actually also in the interests of everybody else. And when you have a system that is set up on force, fraud, and coercion, that is what the state is. It is funded coercively. It acts fraudulently, corruptly. It has its buddies, all of that kind of stuff. All of those incentives make people that sit in the positions of power in government, acting in their own self-interest, work directly against you. You switch that around. You voluntarize it as much as you possibly can and make sure that if they want that office, they want to call the shots, they want to do X, Y, or Z, that to act in their own self-interest, to keep that position, to keep the money flowing in, et cetera, they need to do what is in the best interest of you. And to any extent that they're not doing it, change the incentive structure. I think that means a stateless society. People say that's crazy. Maybe that's utopian. Maybe it is. But to any extent that we can take one tiny little step in that direction of changing the incentive structure, we're changing the world and making it better for, those that are coming behind us. To use that old adage, we are planting trees under whose shade we know we will never sit. We got to make those changes now. We got to make those changes yesterday. And hopefully we'll have a better world to hand off to our kids.
Long story short, every amount of change that Dane just said takes one power coin out of their pocket and puts it into your pocket eventually, or your children's pocket, or your children's pocket. It's important to start moving now, because if they've got all the coins, kind of like Russia, you don't have any bargaining chips. So we need to start moving forward. And on that happy note, Dane, where can they find this episode of Weapons of Meme Destruction podcast?
They can find this episode at wmdpodcast.com/115. They can get the audio-only episodes on any podcast catcher. Just search Weapons of Meme Destruction. They can get the videos on YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey. Just search Weapons of Meme Destruction. Look for episode 115. On those videos and on the website link will be the show notes page, so you'll be able to see some of the articles we talked about. You'll be able to see those videos that we talked about what Biden had to say about Nordstream 2, et cetera, et cetera. And then you could also link up with us and join the broader sane space, the conversation on every platform we're on, by also following us on on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. And by the way, I looked it up during one of David's lengthy diatribes during this episode. Mm-hmm. And interspersed between my filibusters is the new, and as of today, not yet banned, hopefully for a while longer.
Soon enough.
TikTok handle is, for those of you who are on TikTok, is at, all lowercase, WMD podcast _3.0. Okay? WMD podcast _3.0. That's where to find the new TikTok. I did see that one of our earliest followers on that new TikTok was somebody who's been following us since our first TikTok, which is where she originally found us. And she is a supporting listener of the show. You know who you are. We are happy to have you. We love you very much. And if you would like to become a supporter of the show, just go to that website, wmdpodcast.com, support our work. You'll see your options there to support us. The link under our videos on YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey has a link to donate Bitcoin to us if you would like to support us in that way. We appreciate every dime that you send towards this humble podcast so that we can hopefully make it our full-time job and pump out some content for you more frequently than we currently are able to now. David, with that being said, do we want to send off the people with happy vibes before they come back for 116?
I'd like to do that very much after that 5-minute.
I don't think it was that long.
It was long.
Minute and a half.
It's so long.
Minute and a half max.
Anyway, I thought you were going to say.
I was going to cough.
Yeah, you're going to cough?
I was going to try to wait until we stop the episode.
There we go. I got it. All right. Stay safe, you fuckers. And more importantly, stay free.